The DJI Osmo Action 6 is here, and right out of the box, the Action 6 makes it easy for a beginner to capture incredible footage. But knowing how to use the Action 6 and getting the maximum possible quality from this camera are very important, and that's what today's video is all about. By the end of this video, you're going to be well equipped to get the best footage from this camera. And for ease of navigation, I've created a table of contents below. So first of all, one of the new things that are included with the Action 6 is this new magnetic mount right here. You've got these two clips right here, and these correspond on the bottom of the camera right here. And you're just gonna click it into place, and it's a very strong mount. Once you click it, it's not gonna disconnect easily. And then to disconnect it, you just squeeze these right here, and it's going to release it. On the front here, you have a microphone right here, and then this is gonna be your white balance sensor right here. This is going to make sure that the color science is correct when you're filming or taking photos. And then right here, we have the lens cover, which if you want to remove this to install something such as an ND filter or other special filter, you're going to turn counterclockwise to loosen it and clockwise to retighten it. I'm gonna power this on, which I powered it on using the power quick switch button right here. And the power quick switch button is the way you turn it on and off. And then if you tap it quickly, it's going to switch between your modes. And then right here, this is the USB-C port with the waterproof cover. So you push that, you slide it, pop it down, and you lift it up, and that is your USB-C connectivity right there. That is how you connect it to your computer, your phone, or for charging it. When you close the door, just make sure there isn't any red showing here. Red means this camera is not waterproof and water is going to get in. Pop it up, and it's gonna make a nice click into place just like that. But back to the front here, this is the front display right here. The front display is also touch capable. So you can actually swipe and change settings here if you have this camera facing you, if you have it mounted in a particular way, where getting to the back is not convenient. It's very nice to have that there. And then going around to this side, this is going to be where you insert your battery as well as your micro SD card if you want to use one. And I'll tell you in a moment why I say if you want to use one. But you're gonna push this and then lift up, and it's going to fold down. And it is worth noting that the battery in here, the 1950 milliamp hour battery, is the same battery that's used by the Action 5 Pro. So if you already own the Action 5 Pro, you can use that battery in this. In addition, if you own the Osmo 360, this battery is also compatible with that. And then right here is the micro SD card slot. So I have a micro SD card in there because I want additional storage, but you don't have to have a micro SD card. We're gonna talk about the internal storage that is built into this camera in a moment. But same thing, when you close the door back, you just wanna make sure there's no red showing. So you're gonna push this down, it's gonna click into place. Going around to the back here, this of course is the main touchscreen on the camera right here. And then pivoting this down here, on top of the camera, this is your record button. So if you wanna start, stop recording, take a photo, anything like that, that is right here. And if you bought the standard config like I did, you're also going to have a curved adhesive mount that's included that is not currently attached here. I don't have that on me at the moment, but that is also included, as well as the thumb screw to attach it to the mount. So for first time setup, you wanna insert the battery like I did, you're going to power it on, and then you're going to wanna connect to the DJI Mimo app. Now you are able to skip that up to 5 times, but after that you do have to pair it to the app. And once you connect it, it is going to prompt you for that first time firmware update. So you'll want to download and install that firmware. If you don't do that, you're not going to see a lot of the menu options I'm going to show you today, and it is important to do that initial firmware. In addition, you'll want to plug this in and give it a charge. The Action 6 does support fast charging, so you're gonna be able to charge it from 0 to 80% in less than 20 minutes. So looking at the screen here, I just wanna go through a couple of the options on here so that you're familiar with where to find stuff. So first of all, up here in the upper left is storage. And right now it's showing the storage of my SD card in there. I currently could film up to 2 hours and 46 minutes still with the free space that's left on the card in this particular video mode with these settings. And that is going to dynamically adjust depending on which mode you're in. If you're in photo mode, it's gonna tell you how many photos you can take. If you're in time-lapse mode, it's gonna show you how long your end result time-lapse can be before it runs out of space. So it's very nice to have that up there. And this button over here, where there's the play button, this is where you're able to see what you've already captured on the camera. So if you click the 4 squares in the upper left, you can toggle through all of your footage you've captured. If you wanna find a clip and preview it back, I've got a lot of clips on there already as I've taken this on some hiking adventures. And spoiler alert, it's done an incredible job. I'm gonna show you lots of samples today. And then down here, if you click, this is gonna be one of the ways to toggle through the modes on here. And I'm gonna go through all of those settings in a moment. And then down here at the bottom, this is where you can change your basic parameters. We're gonna talk about that in a moment as well. And over here on the right, this is where you're gonna change your more advanced parameters, which we're also gonna get into that. And then up here, this is where you can see the battery percentage remaining. So in this case, we have 96% left currently. All right, so before we get into those best settings for each mode, there are some key settings we wanna set on the upper menu up here. Now over here under this gear, if you're using a wireless mic, right here at the wireless mic is where you're going to be able to pair it. And I did quite a few clips on my hike the other day using the DJI Mic 2. That mic did an incredible job with the audio, and there's gonna be a bunch of settings down here that you can customize and adjust. And one of those is to record in 32-bit float, and I highly recommend selecting that. That's going to give you the very best quality audio. It's gonna help ensure your audio is usable, even if you got a little bit loud during that recording. And then the screen brightness right here, I like to keep this at the brightest setting. I find that's easiest to view it, especially on a day like today where it's kind of bright and sunny out. But do note, if you have it at the brightest setting, it is going to eat through your battery a little bit quicker. So the default here, I believe, is right about here. It's about 90%. And then another setting that I recommend checking is the display. I like to have this set to always on display, and then display and single screen preview. I like to have that on as well. Now this setting right here, bitrate, that is a really important one and one I wanna make sure we review. So by default, your bitrate is probably gonna be set to standard, but you definitely want to set the bitrate to high. Your bitrate being in high is going to ensure you're capturing the very best quality footage with this camera. And this camera is really capable with capturing that great footage, so make sure you're getting the best out of it. And then one other setting I recommend changing here is the grid. I like to have the grid on. It's going to give you the 2 parallel vertical lines here and the 2 parallel horizontal lines. That's gonna kind of help you frame your scenes, and I find it helpful. It's not on by default, but I like to turn it on. And then first time, before you use it, I do recommend doing the horizon calibration. So you just wanna set it on a flat surface, then hit confirm, and it's going to calibrate that horizon for you, just to make sure everything is accurate, especially for the stabilization later on. And then storage, so right here, internal storage, you have 50 gigabytes, which is really nice. If you're like me and you sometimes forget to bring along your micro SD card, or if your card fails, you drop it in water, something like that, you have built-in internal storage, so you're not gonna miss out on capturing your adventure. I do recommend adding a micro SD card as well though, and I have a 256 gigabyte SanDisk Extreme Pro card in here. That card does very well, and I've been happy with it in lots of my cameras. So I like to keep that in here as well. Right here, you can lock the screen. This is good if you don't want to accidentally bump a setting on there. If you've got your settings keyed in, you're ready to go, you can lock it. You also want to do this if you have your camera underwater. Otherwise, the water is going to do all kinds of presses on your screen and change a whole bunch of settings on you that you don't want changed. And then to unlock it, you're just gonna swipe up to unlock. And then over here, this controls that front screen. So I like to have the full front screen on. I find that's my preference. That way, if the camera is facing toward me and I'm talking to it, I can see everything that's going on and making sure I have things that are framed properly with the right settings. And that is it for the general menu. So now I wanna go through the video mode first. And this is because the video mode is probably the mode you're going to use most often on this camera. So first thing you wanna do is you wanna click on the bottom where it says the 4K, and you've got a bunch of different options here. But what I recommend doing is I recommend using the 4K 16:9 or the 4K 4:3. Now, if you're curious what the difference is, the 4:3 is going to give you a little bit extra vertical resolution here, but my go-to mode is 4K 4:3, because then I've got that extra here in case I want to reframe that a little bit later on. I'm not stuck with the 16:9. The 4:3 adds a little bit of leeway there. The good thing about the 4:3 is when you drop it on a timeline, it's going to look like it's 16:9. It's going to center it, so you're not going to know unless you drag around vertically. So for just standard talking to the camera, normal shooting, if you don't want to do any slow-mo or anything like that, if you live in the United States, I recommend 4K 24 or 4K 30. But if you do want to do any type of slow-mo later on, you can do 4K 60, and that's going to allow you to do up to 50%, so 2 times slower. But also you can do up to 4K 120, which is going to allow you to do up to 4x slower. But the nice thing is if you record 4K 120 in this mode right here, the standard video mode, you're going to still have the audio with it, versus if you do in the slow motion mode, you're not gonna have any sound. So the nice thing is this is much more versatile. You could drop it onto a 24 or 30 frames per second timeline. You don't have to slow it down. You could just use that footage later on if you want to on that timeline. But if you do want to slow it down, you're also gonna have the option to do that. And if you're doing any type of POV footage, anything like that, I recommend 4K 60. It's gonna give you that realistic look and feel to that footage, and it's really nice for that. And up here in the upper right, this is where you can control your rock steady settings as well as your lens perspective. So you can do rock steady down to rock steady plus, but if you go back here and go to 4K 16:9, when you go up here now, you're gonna have some additional options. You can do rock steady plus. You can also do horizon balancing. And horizon balancing, it's going to keep the horizon balanced. If you tilt your camera up to 45 degrees, you're not gonna lose that balance there. So that is one of the advantages with doing 16:9 if you value that. In addition, you can do full 360 horizon steady as long as you do 4K 16:9. So that is a really nice feature. That means no matter which way you turn this camera, sideways, it's going to keep that horizon level at all times. My typical go-to mode is just simple rock steady. When I'm hiking or biking or doing things like that, I find that is more than enough. But if you want a little bit better stabilization like rock steady plus, you're going to notice a little bit of a crop when I switch to that. And horizon steady has about the same amount of crop as rock steady plus, but horizon balancing has a little bit more than rock steady, but less than rock steady plus or horizon steady. So keep that in mind with the crops. I personally prefer as little crop as possible, and that's my biggest reason for using rock steady. But over here for the modes, you do have that standard D-warp that is going to help eliminate most or all of that fisheye. But then there is a new mode called natural wide, and versus wide, that's going to help eliminate a lot of the distortion, but it's gonna still keep that widest perspective possible. Natural wide is actually my go-to mode most of the time, unless I'm doing a lot of filming where there's people in it, and that's where standard D-warp can be advantageous, but natural wide is still my favorite. And it is worth noting you can go all the way down to ultra wide. Ultra wide is great if you really want that vast perspective around you. So if you're in a wide open landscape, something like that, it can be pretty cool to show how small you look in that wide landscape. So once we've keyed in those parameters, we want to go over here to the right and we want to set up our advanced parameters. But first of all, make sure Pro up here is turned on. By default, it's going to be off like this. You want to click on it and you want to see yellow, because that is going to unlock all of the key settings we need here. So first of all, under exposure, there is a couple tweaks that I recommend doing here. And to be clear, the goal with this is to get you footage right out of the camera that looks really good, that you can quickly put together to tell your story or share on socials. So for ISO range over here, I recommend doing 100 to 1600. And I recommend doing that 1600 because if you step into a shadowy area, something like that, the Action 6 is going to intelligently boost that ISO in order to keep your image exposed properly. If you're in anything where you need ISO 1600 or higher, it's going to be a good idea to use a SuperNight mode. But in my lighting right now, for instance, if you look, it's using a ISO of 254, which is great. Anything 100 to 400 is really what you want to see on here as much as possible. It's going to give you that really crisp, good looking footage with very little noise in it. And then up here, it's defaulting right now to 1/1000 for the shutter speed. But as the sun goes in and out of clouds, you can see that dynamically adjust here. But one thing I recommend doing is click up here where it says S, and you're going to get different shutter speed settings here. I recommend putting the shutter speed to a range of 1/200 to 1/8000. And the reason I recommend this is going to keep this camera from getting any of that jitter and ghosting that you can get, especially if you step into low light with stabilization turned on. So if you have rock steady on and you go into low light with this, it is going to introduce jitter and ghosting if the shutter speed drops below about 1/200. So this is a safeguard for that. So what the camera is going to do is if it needs to drop all the way to 1/200 to expose the image and it's still not properly exposed, it's going to raise the ISO up as high as it can go to properly expose it. And that's what we want it to err on the side of. We don't want the camera to lower the shutter speed unless you're using a gimbal and low lighting, which I'm going to talk about those settings in a separate video because those are very advanced settings. And this video is primarily all about getting the best no edit footage straight out of your Action 6. And then if you want to click back up here in the EV setting, I actually find with the Action 6 that keeping it right at that 0.0 EV is great. But if you are in a lot of bright sunlight and you really want the cloud details to pop really well and to be there, you could set this to -0.3, and that's going to slightly underexposure footage. But I found if I do that, it's generally going to make my footage a little bit darker than I like. So on this model, I actually like to keep it right at that 0.0. So then once you've keyed those in, you're gonna click the check mark here. And then next, let's go over to white balance. So white balance, you've got a couple options here. You can just keep it at auto, and the camera's going to automatically adjust it. But I find that sometimes the footage runs a little bit cool for my liking, and it's a little bit more blue than I like. So what I like to do on a day like today, in the middle of the day, I like to click M up here, and I like to set it to a simple 5600K and just leave it at that if I'm filming in the daytime. If I'm filming at sunrise or sunset, you want to adjust this to 6500K right here. It's going to give you those nice golden hour colors, and your footage is gonna just look incredible using that white balance. But I like using that manual value because that's gonna help ensure the white balance isn't changing on you when you're recording. So I'm gonna put it back to 5600K because this is daytime right now. And then down here for the color mode, you've got two options. So you've got that normal 10-bit and you've got that D-Log-M 10-bit, which by the way, if you use D-Log-M 10-bit for grading later on, color recovery is gonna be off by default, but I recommend turning it on. It's going to give you a preview of what your footage is going to approximately look like. So if you just want footage straight out of the camera that you don't have to grade at all later on, just stick with the normal 10-bit mode. It's going to look incredible. A lot of the scenes I filmed on this hike were filmed in the normal 10-bit mode and they look great. But if you do want to do a little bit of grading later on, do the D-Log-M mode. And then DJI has a free LUT that's going to convert that footage from log to Rec 709. And Rec 709 is simply the color space that you need before you share your footage. It's going to help ensure it looks right. And I will link to that LUT in the description below. It's free to download from DJI's site. There's no cost. You don't have to put in any info. You can just go there and click and download it. And then the next setting we're going to adjust is the variable aperture over here. So this is something new with this camera. There is a variable aperture from f2 all the way up to f4. And the Action 6 is able to adjust that automatically depending on what you're filming, which is the setting that I highly recommend unless you have a special use case to adjust it. So if you go over here, you can do the fix 2.8, you can do the starburst f4, and it tells you down here what that starburst is going to do. But basically that has a minimum focus distance of 20 centimeters, and you can capture that 6-point starburst effect from any light sources. So if you have like city lights, light post, anything like that, it's going to give you that starburst. But then what you want to note with the f2.8 is that minimum focus distance is 35 centimeters. So you do want to make sure you have this camera far enough from you if you're recording your face talking to it, because if it is closer than 35 centimeters, you are going to be blurred and it's not going to look good. But what I personally recommend doing is I recommend keeping it set to auto, and I recommend keeping it set to the range of f2 to f4. You can adjust the range over here to various settings from the f2 to f4 all the way up to the f2.8 to f4. But I recommend keeping it in the f2 to f4 range. That is going to give your camera the greatest ability to adjust that to get you the best quality. And down here for the stabilization scenario, it's going to give you the daily versus sport option. If you're doing a lot of really intense movement, running around a lot, that type of thing, I would set it to sport. But otherwise, if you're just doing vlogging or normal biking, hiking like I do, anything like that, I recommend just keeping it set to daily. That is going to work quite well. And over here for image adjustment, so something I personally like and recommend to make this footage look even better, your texture is going to start at 0, but I recommend going all the way down to -2. And basically texture is that sharpness, and overly sharp footage, it looks amateur, it does not look good. And smaller cameras like this have a tendency to give you that over sharpened look. So I recommend going all the way down to -2. It's going to give you the lowest sharpness, and I personally think it looks great, especially if you're in woods, like I do a lot of my filming. You don't want all of those individual tree branches and leaves to be overly sharpened. It just does not look good. And then for noise reduction, this is going to start at 0 as well. I also recommend dragging this all the way down to -2. if you're filming in the daylight like this. This is going to apply the least amount of noise reduction to your footage, and it's going to look really good. Now, if you are filming in low light and using this mode with manual settings, you're going to probably want to keep that noise reduction right around 0. That's gonna help reduce any of that noise and grain in your footage. But for normal daytime filming, keep it at -2, you're gonna love it. So those are the advanced parameter settings here, but we wanna click up here on audio. And for the audio, you can adjust, you can have stereo or mono. Personally, I like mono, then it's just in one single audio track. And then for the wind noise reduction, I personally just keep this set at standard. The Action 6 does a really good job adjusting that in camera, but you can also set it to high. So if you're in an absolutely terribly windy place or you're along an ocean and it's really windy, you may want to set it to high, but standard is my go-to. One other thing to note in the video mode here is up here at the top, this is where you can change your aspect ratio. So you can use the default here, or if you want to record in portrait only, you can set that to portrait and it's going to do this right there. And if you want to record in landscape only, you can select landscape and it's going to make sure you stay in landscape. So those are the key video settings right there. But one other thing I wanted to mention is down here where you see the 1x, you now have the ability on this camera to double tap that and it's going to zoom in 2 times, but it's going to still maintain that 4K quality. So the nice thing about this footage is it is oversampled. You're going to be able to zoom in without losing that, and I've tried this out and it actually looks pretty good. But for the majority of the time filming, you want to keep it on 1x if you don't have a reason to zoom in, because 1x is still going to be the highest quality. So next, we're going to take a look at the photo mode, since that's the first one I skipped over. Photo mode is going to be pretty straightforward. Some things I recommend is doing the 4x3. That's going to give you that full 38 megapixels. If you do the 16x9, it's going to be 34. If you do the medium, it's going to go all the way down to 9. So I recommend just doing the highest quality up there with that large. And then you, of course, can change the lens perspective here, depending on what you're capturing. I just keep it to wide. But if I was doing a picture with a lot of people in it, I would do the standard D-warp or the natural wide. But most of the time I'm doing landscapes with the photo mode on here. And then down here, if you wanted to take a certain amount of images per second, you can adjust that. I recommend this mainly if you're capturing people. People have a tendency to close their eyes, and this is a great way to make sure you get at least one picture where mostly everybody has their eyes open. So if I'm doing that, I would recommend the 9 pictures in 3 seconds mode, but you can adjust to other various combinations there. Then over here is going to be our advanced parameters, but there's not going to be quite as many options in photo mode. For exposure, I just recommend keeping auto across the board. White balance, same thing, keep it auto for this mode. Variable aperture, auto as well. And then for the format, you can do JPEG or JPEG plus RAW. If there's any chance you want the ability to edit that photo later on in something like Lightroom or Photoshop, do the JPEG plus RAW. If you don't care about that and you just want a photo straight out of the camera, do JPEG. Going over to our SuperNight mode. All right, so SuperNight mode, it's gonna look a little night-like right there. With this mode, you don't have quite as many options. You can go all the way up to 4K 60, but with this mode, I like to do 4K 30. So I'm generally not going to be doing any type of slow motion at nighttime. And then up here, of course, you can set your rock steady and your lens perspective settings. I'm not going to go through those again. We talked about them in the standard video mode. And then the other thing to note here is under the advanced parameters, for the exposure, I recommend just keeping all of this set to auto. The camera is going to intelligently adjust that, and it's going to boost the ISO quite a bit. You have the ability to go up to 51,200. And the reason it's going to do that is it's going to help make sure your shutter speed doesn't get so slow that you're going to get jitter and ghosting in your footage. So the camera is going to intelligently adjust for that. And it's also going to apply quite a bit of noise reduction to your footage because of that. And then over here, the variable aperture, I recommend keeping this at that large aperture. You want your camera to have that aperture as wide open as possible to let in as much light, because that is going to help you get the best quality footage in this mode. And then for the stabilization, if you're running around at nighttime or doing something that's shaking your camera a lot, go for sport. But otherwise, if you're just walking around at nighttime, stick with daily. Next mode is portrait mode. So portrait mode is designed to make your footage look as good as possible for sharing straight to social media. So if that is your goal, this mode is great for that. But do note this mode has quite a few limitations. It only goes up to 4K 16:9. and you can only go up to 30 frames per second. And then over here with the Pro settings, you are a little bit more limited here as well. You have to keep the ISO set to that, so these settings are locked down a little bit more. And then over here for white balance, you cannot change that either. You're stuck with auto white balance in that mode. But for the aperture, you can still change those settings. So next, we're gonna go to the subject tracking mode. So this one is if you want to track a subject, you can track the subject a pretty good ways on the camera. So the subject can move anywhere across here, and the camera is going to crop that in to follow that subject. But because it is cropping, you are going to be limited with resolution. You can only get the 2.7K up to 9:16, which is vertical, or you can do the 2.7K 16:9. So I feel like this is great if you're doing some type of live stream and you're moving a little bit, maybe you're cooking something and you're walking back and forth in a kitchen, something like that. It could be good for that, but I would not recommend this for your normal standard recording because you are going to be limited by the resolution, and that is a limitation that most of the time you probably don't want. But if you're doing a webcam or a live stream, anything like that, this could be a good option for that. And for the settings over here, I would keep the exposure at auto, the white balance at auto, the variable aperture, I would keep that at auto as well. But then for the image adjustment, put those both to -2, like I did in the other modes. It's going to look best. And then next, this is the slow motion mode. So the first thing to note in this mode is do note you're not going to have any sound with this mode. And then the next thing to note is if you go all the way down to 1080p, you can do some very serious slow motion here, up to that 8x. However, if you're going to use this mode, if you really want that ridiculous slow-mo, you're probably gonna use this mode for the 1080p 8x. But do note later on, it is 1080p footage. So if you try to include it in a 4K timeline, it's not going to look that great, but this is just for something if you wanna share on the socials, this is probably good for that. But you're not going to want to use this mode most of the time otherwise. If you are using this mode, I do recommend changing the ISO settings over here to the 1/1600, but the shutter limitation you can leave alone because this is going to have a faster shutter speed for that slow-mo because of the frames per second you're going to be filming in, so you don't have to worry about that. For the white balance though, I do recommend doing the manual value, and if it's daytime, do the 5600K. And then for the aperture, I recommend keeping that at auto. And then for the image adjustment down here, I recommend -2 for both of those as well. And finally, the time-lapse mode. So time-lapse, I love shooting time-lapses with the Action 6. They look better than ever. I've done a bunch already, including a really beautiful sunset the other night, and this camera did a phenomenal job with that. But one thing to note is the Hyperlapse settings are also under the time-lapse menu. So I'm gonna go through the Hyperlapse first. First of all, for Hyperlapse, I recommend doing 4K 30. That's going to mesh nicely with your other footage. And I recommend doing auto for the rate. This is going to automatically adjust the speed of the Hyperlapse, and it's going to do a really good job with that. And then up here for your lens perspective, I like to do the natural wide also. I think that looks best with this. And then over here for your advanced parameters, I recommend setting these the same as for the video settings. So all of these here are going to be the exact same as how I set them for the video mode. But if you want to do time lapse with this mode, you're gonna click back here and you're gonna toggle over to time lapse. And then I recommend doing custom here. And for the mode up here, I recommend doing wide. And I recommend screen off because a time lapse is going to be going for a pretty long duration, and you don't want your screen on running down your battery. You wanna have your screen off while that's going so that it's not wasting your battery life on a display that you're not even looking at, unless you're sitting there watching your time lapse. So then we're gonna swipe up to set our custom parameters. And right now you see I can only go down to 30 seconds. That is because I just did a night lapse with this last night, and I haven't touched the settings since then. So what we need to do first is we need to go over here to the advanced parameters, and I'm gonna click this back to auto. After I do that, we now can swipe up, and now it's gonna let us change our interval. So let's talk intervals here. First of all, if you're doing a sunset time lapse, where you're gonna keep this going probably for about an hour, I recommend that 2-second interval. If you're doing a daytime time lapse where you want it to go for many, many hours, which by the way, if you do have it going for many, many hours, get yourself a power bank like this one from Anker. You could plug it in and it's going to run this camera for days doing time lapses if you want to do that. These are cheap and affordable, and they're a great option to pair with this camera. But if you are doing an all-day time lapse, I recommend 5 seconds for the intervals or even 8 or 10 seconds. And then if you're doing a night lapse, I recommend an interval of 30 seconds, and I'll show you those custom settings in a moment. But let's go back to the standard couple-hour time lapse, where your end result, you can find out what that's going to be by setting video duration. So video duration, I generally recommend keeping it at infinity. That way, it's not going to stop until you stop it at the end of your time lapse. But this is a handy little calculator. So let's say you want to do a sunset time lapse for 1 hour and you want an interval of 2 seconds. That finished product time lapse is going to be 1 minute. Now that's probably a little bit long for a time lapse. You're going to want to speed that up later on if you did that. But sunset, the advantage of having that 2-second interval is when sunset is at its peak, you're going to be able to have as many frames as possible where those colors are really nice. But if you adjusted it to 5 seconds, you're going to get a 24-second resulting time lapse at 1 hour of actual time with a 5-second interval. And if you did a 5-second interval at 2 hours, you're going to have 48 seconds for your resulting time lapse. So I recommend utilizing this down here as a tool just to see how long your eventual time lapse will be based on your interval. So over here, if you are doing a sunset time lapse, there's a couple settings I recommend changing. First of all, put the ISO range to 100 to 800. This would also apply to a daytime time lapse. And then for the EV value, if you're doing a time lapse during the day or sunset and you've got a lot of clouds in it, I recommend underexposing it slightly. It's going to look better with those details in the sky. It's going to make sure your highlights are not overblown. But I recommend leaving the shutter speed to its default setting. The camera is going to automatically adjust that. And then for the white balance over here, if you're doing a daytime time lapse, set that to 5600K. If you're doing sunrise or sunset, set it to 6500K. And if you're doing a day to night or night to day time lapse, set the white balance to auto, and the camera is going to automatically adjust it depending on time of day. But if you're doing a nighttime time lapse, otherwise known as a night lapse, set this to 3800K. It's going to give you those nighttime colors and it's going to look really good. And then for the other settings here, I recommend doing that fixed f2.8 aperture that's going to let the most light into the camera, which means it is going to use as low of an ISO as possible, which is going to give you the best quality footage. Now, for your format, you've got a couple options. You can do video, or you can do video plus JPEG or video plus RAW. So basically the difference is if you do just video, you're just going to get a single .mp4 output file for that time lapse. But if you do video plus JPEG or video plus RAW, you're going to get a single video plus you're going to get a RAW file for every instance of that interval. So every 2 seconds, we're going to get a single image. And this is going to be if you want to take those images later on and you want to mass edit them and import them. It's going to give you a little bit more flexibility with the look and feel of that time lapse, but if you don't want to mess with that, just keep it set to video. And video plus JPEG is going to give you smaller files than the RAW, but you're not going to be able to do as many adjustments to those. If you are wanting to do the photo time lapse, I recommend video plus RAW. It's going to give you the highest quality files that you can manipulate the most later on. So one final thing I want to show you here, if you do want to do a night lapse, the key thing here is where it says exposure, you want to click M, and then you want to set the ISO to 1600, and you want to set the shutter speed all the way down to 25 seconds. Those settings right there are going to be way overexposed in the daytime, as you can see by the white on here. So do not use these settings during the day. These are nighttime only. And if you are in an urban area or something like that, where there's quite a bit of city lights, you may only need something like 5 seconds for your shutter speed, and you might be able to put the ISO down to something like 800 or even 400. But these settings with the 1600 and the 25-second shutter speed, these are for a rural area where you want to get that dark nighttime starry sky. Those are the settings you'll want to use for that. And then when you go back to the interval down here, after we keyed those in, you're going to notice the lowest interval you can go is 30 seconds. You do want to set it to that. If you keep it at 40 seconds, you're not going to have as long of a time lapse. You're going to miss out on a lot of the stars and other things going on in the sky at nighttime. So I recommend the 30 seconds there for the interval. And one final thing, if you want to save presets, what you're going to do is key them in here, and then you're going to swipe down to get to the main menu. You're going to click here, and you're gonna save current settings. So you're gonna click custom, and then what you can do is you can toggle through these. So let's say these are my skiing settings. I can toggle to that, click confirm, and it's gonna save it as skiing. If they're your diving settings, surfing, air, racing, biking, moto, hiking. Hiking is what I like these settings for, so I'm going to click confirm. And then what you can do now is when you go to the quick switch, it's going to go to the hiking mode first. And then of course, this is where you can toggle through those other modes. But any of them that you add, by default, it's going to add them to the quick switch mode, which is really nice. So let's say I wanted to add another, and this one's gonna be my 4K 120. This is gonna be for my slow-mo. So I'm going to add that there, and then I'm going to swipe down. I'm gonna click here, and I'm gonna click custom, and then I'm going to toggle over here. And for this one, I'm going to put it under running. That is the closest to what makes me think of slow motion, because I might wanna slow that down later on. So I'm gonna click confirm there. And then one other I'm gonna save is 4K 60, and I am going to save that as my vlogging settings. So I'm gonna go all the way over here. The reason I'm gonna vlog with those settings, the 4K 60, is that gives me max flexibility later on if I wanna slow down some of the scenes to half speed. I've got that there. So now if we go and toggle through these.
Photo, video.
By the way, if you wanna add anything else to this menu, you can click up here on the 3 dots, and it's gonna take you to that menu where you can add other stuff. So if you wanna add SuperNight to the quick switch, portrait mode, subject tracking, slow-mo, time-lapse, or hyperlapse, you can do that as well. And if you'd like to learn more about the Action 6 and how to get the best quality footage from this camera, check out this playlist right here.